Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Coach Podcast. Since 2010, the most listened to show in the nonprofit sector dedicated to helping your charity succeed. It's no secret that combining online and offline techniques is the key to fundraising success, and practical nonprofit management advice is what you need. The Nonprofit Coach Podcast with Ted Hart is the perfect landing point to learn from experts around the world who provide advice you can use. Ted Hart is, without a doubt, one of the foremost nonprofit thought leaders. Also a successful author, his books range from successful online fundraising to expert nonprofit management. Guests on the Nonprofit Podcast are leaders in their field who share their insider tips and trade secrets in a conversational style both the experienced and novice will benefit from. Ted and his guests help you and your organization move to greater levels of efficiency and fundraising success. Ted lectures around the world, but now he's here for you. After the show, you can find all of our podcasts at tedhart.com, on iTunes, and now just say, Alexa, play Nonprofit Coach on TuneIn. Now, welcome the host of the Nonprofit Coach Podcast, Ted Hart.
And welcome here to this latest podcast of the Nonprofit Coach. We have a very big show. This is our year-end show. So, of course, always here at year-end, Sprinkel Grace is our page 2 expert. But before we get to our page 2 expert, we have several people who are going to be here at the top of the show that are going to help us with a number of different topics. And first up, let's move right on over to page 1 news.
You've been listening to the Nonprofit.
And first up here on the Nonprofit Coach here on page 1 news is Michael Nielsen. Michael Nielsen is the Marketing, Communications, and Public Policy Vice President at AFP, and he's here to give us the Association of Fundraising Professionals Minute. Michael Nielsen, welcome here to the Nonprofit Coach Podcast.
Thank you, Ted. I really appreciate you having me on. Happy to be here.
Yeah, so bring us up to date. We're here at calendar year end, obviously a very important time for all fundraisers. Bring us up to date with what's happening and what the members and the listeners here of the Nonprofit Coach should know about AFP.
Sure. I think there's obviously a lot going on, and this is, of course, as you well know, the busiest time of the year for fundraising. We've got a number of things going on. I'd say one of the most important is I think we just released, or a couple of weeks ago, released the findings from the third quarter report from the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. And I think if people aren't familiar with that tracks giving quarterly from actual giving data that we get from thousands of organizations. And it shows a really interesting time, one that I think giving so far, as we often find through 3 quarters of the year, is down, but as most fundraisers know, the fourth quarter is always the most critical. But what we're seeing every year now, and this is the third year, is that we have farther and farther to go to make up in that third quarter, and that's kind of concerning. So we've got some tips through the Fundraising Effectiveness Project about some of the issues that I know that you've talked about in terms of donor retention, donor cultivation, that kind of thing, to work on improving those levels of giving as we continue to see a really increased, I think, more focused on major giving, more and more, and we're seeing kind of lower levels of giving drop very slowly but surely. We're seeing that in a lot of different kinds of research. So I think there are some real important tips and some important advice that fundraisers can get through the Fundraising Effectiveness Project. So that is certainly a key thing, as we're dedicated to kind of keeping people up in the fundraising environment and making sure they've got sort of the best practices and ideas moving forward.
Terrific. And for our listeners today who would like a link to the Fundraising Effectiveness Project, we have posted that at facebook.com/Ted Hart. You can follow along today for all of the links from today's show. Michael?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Absolutely. I think the second thing, though, is particularly as we move forward into 2020, one of the things that AFP is working on is obviously we'll always be dedicated to fundraising, education, and training. That's our bread and butter. That's one of our key missions. But we're also, I think, over the last couple of years, are beginning to look at issues that affect fundraising but aren't directly related to fundraising skills. So things like leadership development, as we have done some recent studies showing some real concerns about leadership and management, toxic cultures at nonprofits that while not directly related to fundraising, are impacting the way and the ability of fundraisers to flourish and to practice their jobs at the highest level. So, we're looking at issues like that and developing some curriculum around leadership development. How do you lead up, leading the board, leading your president and CEO, issues like that. As you know, we launched the Women's Impact Initiative a couple of years ago to look at gender equity issues in the profession, and we still have a way to go in terms of the gender gap and sexual harassment and the proportion of women in senior leadership positions that is way behind their overall representation in the profession. We're also launching in 2020 a campaign looking at mental health awareness and self-care. We just had a webinar on that, actually, I guess, last week, that was really well attended. Hundreds of people hearing about how they can take care of themselves. Obviously during the holidays is a stressful time, but just throughout the year, and making sure that their colleagues and their employees are in the state of mind and have the resources to do their jobs effectively, because that is a huge issue that's just not being talked about right now. So it's those kinds of, I don't want to call them secondary issues, because they're really critical to fundraising performance, and they're things that we're hearing members want us to address. So I think it's that mix of both pure fundraising education, but as well as these other issues that affect the workplace environment and the workplace culture that we all know are so critical to success.
Well, Michael, I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing this information with our listeners. I think there's a number of us in the nonprofit sector who are looking to AFP right now with a lot of pride in that it seems that AFP is moving back to what I would consider to be a space that it once really held dominance in, and that's a space that has research looking at the cutting edge issues, convening people together to learn, and not to say that AFP should move away from sort of the nuts and bolts and the how-to, but there's a lot of people who do nuts and bolts and how-to, and I think an Association of Fundraising Professionals International really should be looking at the kinds of issues that you spoke of today. So bravo to AFP here at calendar year end, a very important time, as we said, for all fundraisers. And Michael, we can't thank you enough for bringing us the Association of Fundraising Professionals Minute here on the Nonprofit Coach.
Thank you, Ted. Really appreciate it.
Great. Next up here on the Nonprofit Coach is a good friend of mine I'd like to introduce you all to, and that's Steve Culbertson, who is currently the President and Chief Executive Officer at Youth Services America, and holds a very important space in the nonprofit sector. He's held that position since May of 1996, and certainly has been a thought leader in the area of youth service to America in a variety of different forms. And one of the things that I always look to Steve and others is what's happening in the nonprofit space that is very consequential, sometimes historical, certainly newsworthy. And so welcome here to the Nonprofit Coach, Steve Culbertson.
Hey, Ted. It's good to be with you.
Steve, it's great to have you here because, this is, as our listeners know, the Nonprofit Coach is completely nonpartisan. We do not talk about political partisan issues. And I say that only because there have been some historical things that have happened that may sound political, but we're not addressing them here on the Nonprofit Coach in a political way at all. But I wanted to get a chance to chat with you about some rather historical things that have happened that I think, and I wanted to get your read on, are important to the nonprofit sector. One in particular that I wanted to draw everyone's attention to is just last month, the historic nature of a report in the New York Times that the Donald J. Trump Foundation was found in violation of a variety of different rules and use of misuse of monies that were entrusted with that foundation. Steve, have now been ordered to pay a $2 million fine. So I wanted to get a chance to chat with you a little bit about why is this important, and why would we take even a minute of time here on the Nonprofit Coach to talk about that and related issues.
Well, I think that the American public has a very strong relationship with the nonprofit sector, and there's a sentiment of faith, that when I make a gift to an organization, that they'll use it wisely, and that nonprofit, that 501c3, is legitimate, that it's actually dealing with issues of health and education, human service, human rights, the environment. Lord knows we've got lots of need out there, and every dollar counts. And so when we hear about nonprofit sort of scandals like this with the Trump Foundation, they're eye-opening, particularly when a sitting president of the United States is fined $2 million for abuse of power, basically was the word that the Attorney General used. And,
that's right.
That's really a remarkable sort of story, I think, and it wasn't just in the New York Times. It's been literally across all the media platforms out there.
That's right.
And
that's
yet,
right.
I think there's been, just people are so shell-shocked by what's going on here in Washington that there was almost, no backlash. There was no people barely batted an eye. And I think we're just at this point where.
You mentioned the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, and I wanted to add to where you're going with this. A statement that she issued along with this order. Charities are not a means to an end, which is why these damages speak to the president's abuse of power and represent a victory for not-for-profits that follow the law. Funds have finally gone where they are deserved to 8 credible charities. And she went on to state that the settlement also requires that Donald Jr., Eric, and Ivanka Trump must undergo training so that this behavior doesn't occur in the future again. So we note this, again, as you said, because of its historic nature. But, again, you were sharing with us why this should matter to all of us.
Yeah, I think we, those of us who get up every morning and raise money and do the good work of our nonprofit organizations, really, we have a special relationship with both the law and a special relationship with our donors and a special relationship with the people whom we serve. And if you desecrate that trust on any of those 3 relationships, to me, it takes down the whole movement, and it's really a black eye, I think, in the nonprofit world. I think as the Attorney General said, this is a victory for nonprofits that do follow the law, which is the vast majority of us. But, when it's the President of the United States and when it's in the millions of dollars, and it just builds on sort of his historic record. When he came into office, he was being sued by over 3,500 different entities. And I think we go back to Trump University, on the education side. Right after he took office, he had to pay a fine of $25 million for defrauding literally thousands of students who had enrolled at Trump University, which was just a completely fraudulent place. So, there's a record here of this guy, and he's not the only one, but he is President of the United States, and I therefore think it's important to elevate this as you're doing and to illuminate this, that, fraud is anytime there's money, there's going to be fraud. And I think those of us who are running organizations need to be careful of that.
And that's why I want to thank you again for coming on to help us just to elevate this issue. Even just today in the Salt Lake Tribune, there's a whistleblower claim that the LDS Church has stockpiled $100 billion in charitable donations and dodging taxes and accusations about deceptive practices for donors in that regard. So I think here at year end, Steve, you would agree that this is not raised as a political issue, and anyone that would see it as a political issue is completely missing the point, and that is that there is a fragile trust that we all hold with the public when it comes to charitable activities. And the laws are put in place to protect the public and to ensure that the funds that they entrust with the nonprofit sector are spent for those purposes. And any time that anybody, regardless of their political persuasion, breaks that trust, it actually hurts all of us in the sector and potentially breaks a trust that could harm people's lives who are counting on the services that many nonprofits provide.
Right, and I think in terms of the LDS Church, for example, you think of that $100 billion that they've got socked away that is not going to the charitable purposes for which it was given. And you think how many people are hungry on the streets, how many people are not able to get presents for their children, how many people are not going to be able to serve a Christmas meal to their family, how many people are going to have to work on Christmas because they need the money. And you go back to, just the amount of pain in the world. All you have to do is walk along any street of any American city and see that and listen to people's stories. And, that money ought to be into the system doing the work that it was given toward. I have the same feeling about these donor advised funds. All that money just sits there in the charitable, whether it's Schwab or whether it's Fidelity or Vanguard. People gave that money, they took the tax deduction, and yet that money isn't working, to make the world a better place. It's just churning right now till eventually it'll be given out, but there's no rule on it, You need that money out there.
Well, in that regard, I will just insert. Yeah, I will just insert there that the average donor advised fund grants upwards of 22%, whereas the average private foundation gives away 5%. So I think there's varying degrees, but I think across the board, the issue here is one of trust, following the rules as they are stated, and making sure that the emphasis is on getting funds to those in need and where donors have entrusted them to go. Steve, I want to thank you for your time, and I'm hoping that perhaps you'll come back on the show and explore these topics with us when we can take a little bit more time, because unfortunately there isn't just one story here, but there are many stories that just sort of speak to the heart of the nonprofit sector and the trust that we must all hold for the community.
And thanks particularly to your listeners. I was one of the original CFREs in that first year when they launched it, and the work that your listeners do to help people out there, which is the most important thing. I think at the end of the day, that's really what we're talking about, is just terrific, and I want to wish them all a happy holiday season.
Well, that's great, and that's a great transition. I'll actually bring Jeff Stanger in here. He is about ready to give us the CFRE International Minute here on the Nonprofit Coach, and since you were one of the very first CFREs, I'm sure he'll want to say hello to you. So, Jeff, come on in, and Steve is still here with us for a minute or two.
Yeah, Steve, hello, and thank you, and that was a perfect transition. So glad to be here, Ted, and happy to talk about CFRE.
Terrific. Bring us up to date on what's happening with CFRE International.
Sure. So our next deadline is January 15th. That'll be the next application deadline, and that will be for the first quarter test window, which will go through March 15th. And it was something to remember for those of you, it's 2 weeks left in the year. If you have personal development funds in your budget, I know we all don't have those, but some organizations do, and if those are there and they're sitting there and it's a use it or lose it kind of situation, a couple things to consider. One, you can get your application in now, even if you don't want to test until, somewhere later in the next year, you can at least use that money to do that. Or this is a great time if you can sign up go to My Education Finder on our website and look for, let's say you need 2 or 3 more continuing education points. You can find a webinar, find a local event near you where you can pick up those last few points. So just a little reminder on that.
Terrific. What else is going on now that we're here at year end?
Well, one thing that you might want to check out is we have on our CFRE Central, which is our community, and anytime, once you've created an application, either you're a CFRE, existing CFRE, or you're working towards it, you have access to CFRE Central, which is our community. And about a month ago, we did an Ask Me Anything with, and I was actually the host of that, and we did crisis communications. And we were blown away by the turnout, the number of questions people asked, how many times people have downloaded that since that. So, all of us have to wear in this field a lot of different hats. And eventually, you're going to be at an organization where something comes along, it thrusts you into the spotlight, you're having to answer questions to donors, to the press, whatever. And how do you approach that, especially if you're not the one who's always been out there in front and had that kind of training? So if you want to go to CFRE Central and look at that, Ask Me Anything, there's a great deal of valuable information and probably questions that your listeners have had, but maybe were a little afraid to ask. They can check out that thread.
Terrific. Thank you for drawing our attention to that. And, of course, we're going to post the link to CFRE.org over at facebook.com/Ted Hart so that folks can pick up on all of the topics today, including the deadlines that are coming up and the opportunity to also listen in on Ask Us Anything. I want to thank you, Jeff, for all the information that you've brought us this year, and we look forward to having you back here on the Nonprofit Coach in the new year.
Well, thank you, and we appreciate your show and all you do to educate and give a spotlight on what we're doing. So thank you.
Terrific, and now we're going to head right on over to page 2. For our listeners, Kay Sprinkel Grace really needs no introduction, as she is always the speaker that our producer, Diane Peach, schedules here as our last show of the calendar year. Why is that? Because Kay Sprinkel Grace is so popular. This show is always one of the most listened to podcasts. Kay is a San Francisco-based organizational consultant, providing workshops and consultation to local, regional, national, and international organizations in strategic development planning, case and board development, staff development, and other issues related to leadership. And today, Kay has brought to us, suggested a very, very important topic, and that is what comes after giving and receiving. And Kay, I have to say, all of our speakers today, Steve Culberson, Michael Nielsen, Jeff Stanger, have all talked at various levels of this issue of stewardship and trust and working with our donors. So these have been great tee-ups for you.
They have been great tee-ups.
Welcome back, Kay Sprinkel Grace.
Yeah, I've been sitting here taking notes. So I've been in this business a long time, as you know, Ted, and I've worked with organizations that are large and small and new and venerable. And the one consistency I find is their inconsistency in stewardship. And it is the most overlooked, underfunded practice, and it doesn't matter, as I say, the size of the organization. So I'd like to just suggest a few things this morning in our time together, and I'd like to frame it by starting with 2 quotations that I think are pretty provocative. G.K. Chesterton said that I would maintain that thanks are the highest form of thought, and that gratitude is happiness doubled by wonder. And then an Estonian proverb, who does not thank for little will not thank for much. And that really is the tee-up for what I want to say, is that one of the things that we do, Ted, that is just so annoying, is I go in and I say, so how do you thank your new donors of under $100? Oh, we send them a receipt. Oh, really? And then, of course, during the year, you email them. No, we just don't have the bandwidth. And we're short-staffed, so we have to focus on our major donors. So what I want everybody who's listening to do, and if it's better for you to draw it, grab a pencil or a pen and a blank piece of paper. You don't need a big one. Draw the traditional donor pyramid, which is what we were all trained to. Then next to it, draw an hourglass. And then next to it, draw an inverted pyramid. The donor pyramid has already morphed into an hourglass. We are so skinny in the middle because we have this big base of small donors, and then we have this bulging base of major donors. But what you heard earlier from our colleagues is that we're not getting those small donations. So what I'm telling you now is that what we need to watch for is that we don't end up with an inverted pyramid with a whole lot of big gifts on the top and no gifts at the bottom, very few in the middle, and because the law of physics says that pyramid is going to flop over. And there have been historic times in philanthropy in the United States when that has happened. There were a cluster of small regional colleges in the Northeast that relied on major gifts and on planned gifts. And guess what? When those were all gone, they had no donor base, and some of them had to close their doors. So what I'd like to just do is talk a little bit about why this happens and then give you some ideas about how to keep it from happening. Yes, it is the time of giving and receiving at year end, but it's got to be the beginning of year-round stewarding, thanking, gratitude. So gratitude is deeper than thanks. Thankfulness is the beginning of gratitude. Gratitude is the completion of thankfulness. Thankfulness may consist mostly of words, but gratitude is shown in acts. So where we are falling down is that we are not interacting with our donors other than our major donors after they make year-end gifts. It's almost as though we believe that, well, people really don't like to give, but, year-end they feel charitable, so they give, and then so we just leave them alone. Because, after all, we'll come back to them in a year, but here's some things I'd like you to think about. First of all, the factor of acquisition costs. I think, Ted, it's still up around 11 times more to acquire a donor than it is to renew an existing donor.
Yeah,
but remember,
and Kay, let me just
sure.
accentuate that, because that's as you were going through this, that's exactly where my mind was going. Is I think you're absolutely right in your premise that stewardship is something that often gets lost, or it's the last thing that's done, or what. However, it's not often done very well because it's not seen as central to the overall relationship that we have with donors. Yet we know, as you just said, that it's so much more expensive to find a new donor and to cultivate a new donor than to get your next gift from a current donor. How has the nonprofit sector missed those 2 points coming together at the same time?
Because they've thought of renewal as renewal of the gift instead of the ongoing renewing of the relationship. This is a key point that I think we miss, because renewing is renewing the passion, the engagement, the sense of belonging, and knowledge of the impact. And I learned very early in my career that annual giving is not once a year, it's all year round. And I have seen in organizations where the donors are constantly engaged with news of the impact of their investment, invitations to hear special talks or presentations. It doesn't have to be lavish. It can be something that's going on in the organization that they invite people to, is that then have an opportunity. I remember in my first job, we had an opportunity it was a center for children with learning disabilities, and we had an opportunity to acquire a set of books for early readers that were specifically designed, and we didn't have a budget for it. And the staff came in, and I said, I'm going to ask my friends at Xerox PARC if maybe they would be interested in joining, because they were very engaged. We had engaged them as donors. We had renewed them. They had events at our facility. And I called. The next day we had a $7,000 check from their employee fund because they knew us. They felt good about us. They'd met these teachers. So I think that we miss the impact of renewal as being, we think about John Gardner's work in self-renewal and how it manifested in Bob Waterman's work in institutional renewal. It is the constant reaching down and pulling up the good feelings that you have about an organization. And also, it influences our messaging between AF. And that messaging drifts too easily into scarcity rather than abundance. And so what happens is that I give, let's say I send $250 to you, which is not a big gift, but maybe for me it is. And yet, a mid-year message from you is, well, we're struggling now, and instead of saying, thanks to the generous outpouring, we've been able to sustain a number of our programs, and we are now looking to add a new program, and we wanted to make you aware of it. We're building on your investment. So we have to look at our messaging. We rely a lot on social media, but some of our donors are not doing social media so much for their giving. Many of them still respond to emails, particularly ones that are personalized for them that say, I wanted to tell you about the impact of your gift for this particular program, and then describe what happened. And then the simple line, thanks to you, we're able to keep these children safe, something like that. Well, that then makes me feel renewed. So
it draws you directly to the mission. I'm wondering, Kay, have we just done ourselves in as a fundraising profession by not putting the emphasis on calling ourselves relationship managers?
Oh, totally.
And putting the emphasis on the dollar and the act of fundraising. And the point that you're making is that's just part of the journey. That's not the actual reason for the interaction. It's the relationship itself.
Absolutely, because what we know is that philanthropic investment is a social investment, right? It transcends giving, donating, or contributing, and it requires our diligence and care because it is all about relationships. And you've heard me say many times that fundraising isn't about money, it's about relationships. And what is always thrilling to me is when I'm working with a client who says, we really get it, that this is about relationships and that we mustn't be concerned if somebody doesn't give in a year. And I had an experience as a volunteer in a Stanford campaign where I went to a donor that I'd gone to a long time, and he had 2 kids at Stanford and he was starting a new business, and the temptation at the staff level was, because he said I won't be able to give for several years, and was to just put him in the mail program, just put him so he got a letter, and if he wanted to give, fine. And I said, no, I'd like to continue calling him and talking to him. And I did. And when the next campaign rolled around, the kids had graduated, his business was up and running and flying, I might add, and he endowed a professorship for $2.1 million. Now, the point is that over those 4 years that he was unable to give, I still called him a couple of times a year just to update him, see how he was doing, and it makes a difference. We had, with a campaign I'm doing right now, we had a major gifts officer who followed up persistently but not annoyingly, as did the volunteer, with a major donor candidate. They had $1 million proposal in front of her. They finally connected with her last week at her request, and guess what? They had decided to give $2.5 million because one of the things that was proposed to them was something that they thought they'd really like to do relative to this campaign. So we also, Ted, I think we succumb to assumptions. A small gift comes in, either online or through the mail. Some still do come in through the mail. And because it's a small gift, again, we don't assign resources to it. But we don't know if that's the widow's mite or whether this is a test gift from someone who loves our mission and wants to see how we will respond to them as a person who doesn't make a large gift immediately. So
true, Kay. As you and I have discussed on this show several times, oftentimes those annual donors are donors with training wheels. They're testing you out. You're not the only one that they're making a gift to, but they are making note of how you interact with them.
That's right.
What they learn about your organization. They're not ready to make a major investment in you, but are you missing the opportunity to allow them to learn enough about you to take those training wheels off to move up that donor pyramid? Okay, we're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, I want to talk to you more about the stewardship issue, but also I want to learn from you, how has the topic of stewardship become one that is more associated to religious giving, and how have most nonprofits, as you say, what comes after giving and receiving? It's stewardship, but many nonprofits miss that point, and we'll be right back.
Life gets busy. Wouldn't it be nice to have a central place where you could save what's on your mind? With Google Keep, you can stay on top of your world by quickly and easily organizing everything you want to remember. No matter where you are.
Finalize door list for Thursday's gig.
So when you find inspiration, you can file away your ideas. And Google Keep stores them safely across all your devices. And when the time comes, you'll have everything covered. Save what's on your mind. Google Keep.
Remember, our podcasts and archives are always free and always available 24 hours a day at tedhart.com, on iTunes, and now just say, Alexa, play Nonprofit Coach on TuneIn. Now back to the Nonprofit Coach Podcast with Ted Hart.
And we are back here live with Kay Sprinkel Grace. Just a quick note, after today's show, we do have a little bit of a holiday hiatus, and we will be back live with you on February 18th for the next Nonprofit Coach Podcast. So, Kay, this topic of stewardship that seems to, in a lot of people's minds, be a topic that is more attributable to religious giving. How have we segregated these things out, and why have most nonprofits missed the boat on what comes after giving and receiving?
That's a great observation, and among the many things I learned from the late Hank Rosso was the origin of the word steward. And it's funny. It originally, a steward was the keeper of the sty, as in the animal sty. And then it changed in the Middle Ages. A steward was the keeper of the hall. Then, when it came into religious use, it was the name that was given to the campaign to raise money. So, in fact, I'm looking at the button from Grace Cathedral in San Francisco that somebody gave to me because it says 100% grace, which I am, 100% grace. And but it was their stewardship campaign. So how do we then marry those two ideas? I think we marry those two ideas of the idea that in certain institutions, perhaps a stewardship campaign means raising the money. But stewardship, in our broader sense of it in philanthropy, is how do we keep those engaged? So we are the keepers of the hall, if you will. We are the people who are responsible for maintaining the relationships, maintaining an organization that can be trusted, getting back to the earlier comments that we had from the other speakers. And what we need to do is to make sure that we keep this hall or this organization and its resources, because there's yet another nuance about stewarding, Ted, as you know, which is you hear people say, yes, I give to them because they are good stewards of their assets. So being a
and that's
steward,
high praise. That's high praise
for any
organization that has that reputation.
People say, I give to them.
How does an organization earn that reputation? What are the aspects that are likely to have your donors say that about you?
I believe that it is always coming from abundance, not scarcity, because we tend to fall back on feeling like a needy organization and transmitting to our potential donors and our renewing donors, oh, wow. In fact, I was in a meeting last night, and one of the committee members said, we've just got to tell them we really need help. And I said, you do that, I walk out of this room, and I don't work with you anymore. I said, I will never work with an organization that comes from scarcity rather than abundance. There are other ways of saying it. So what happens is when we come from scarcity, we begin to indicate that we are not stewarding our assets, our revenue very well, and that we're constantly in need of money. Instead of saying, look what we do. Every dollar, I'm working with the San Francisco Marine Food Bank right now. They are fantastic, saying every dollar you give us leverages this much food in the community. And that gives them a wonderful reputation in this community for being excellent stewards of their assets and their revenue, to really make it work in the community. Because what we need to remember is that philanthropy is about long-term. If philanthropy without long-term stewardship is not philanthropy. And here's the reason.
So say that again. But say that again, because
philanthropy without long-term stewardship is not philanthropy. Because philanthropy is transformational. And a giving program without a stewardship program is transactional. End of year, I ask you for a gift. You give me a gift. I may or may not thank you properly, but it's one and done. It's over.
Yeah, and when you allow your organization or any part, as you said, I will get up and I will walk out. If you are starting to, what you are really saying is, if your view of philanthropy is a transaction, then you've missed the point, and I can't be part of that, because long term they cannot be successful. It's not to say that every so often there's a campaign that just strikes people's fancy and they sort of just get involved, and there's that one-off transaction. They're not necessarily connected to the mission. But what you said is that for that to be true philanthropy, that's a long-term commitment. That's a relationship. That takes real effort. And that's where professionals come in. And that's why I asked the question of, have we missed the boat ourselves by allowing what happens to be called fundraising as opposed to relationship management, because it does put the emphasis on the transaction, which is important, and raising money is important. But as I've said on this show many times, if you just need the money, get in line, so does everybody else.
Right,
if you're raising money just to make a budget, well, so does everybody else. Everybody's got a budget every year. The issue is, are you the conduit through which a donor can make great things happen that they wish to have happen?
Well, we need to remember, and again, this is something I deeply believe, not only that people give because we meet needs, not because we have needs, but the second part is that a gift to you is a gift through you into the community. You are not the end user of the gift. And so what you have to do is constantly renew the person's passion for the cause that you're meeting, because otherwise they're not going to keep giving. I mean, go back to the three models I suggested at the beginning. I mean, we used to, when you and I were learning this business, it was all about the donor pyramid, right? And it was just a logical progression. People started at the bottom, and we worked them up, and then at the very top was
the reason, Kay, that it was logical is because it was based on the building of a relationship over time and not just the transaction of a credit card charge or other transaction.
That's right. And then we've gone to the hourglass because we have neglected to move people up from the bottom of the hourglass into the top because we don't steward them until they reach some arbitrary level. Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, she gave $500 this year. Let's invite her to something. Well, why didn't you invite her when she gave $50?
Right.
What do you know about her? The other thing is that, this danger of the inverted pyramid. I mean, listening to, the AFP giving report, I mean, there's some real danger signs, and we saw them last year, and we blamed it on the Tax Act change. Is it really the Tax Act change, or is something happening with our donors? And I think that we have, and I mean, here's where I, lay the big one out. We are way too organizational focused and not enough community focus. We're not looking, through the windows. We keep looking in the mirror. And yes, of course, I want to invest in an organization that is sturdy, that is trustworthy, but you become sturdy and trustworthy in my mind when I see the impact of your work in the community and not telling me about your organizational prowess. The one exception there is something that Michael mentioned, and that is leadership. We are finding that people look as much to the leadership as they do to the mission. And this is an interesting profile of an emerging society that is becoming more discerning, much less emotion in the ongoing giving, but not, of course, in that initial gift. As the Hewlett study showed that they actually disbanded years ago. They were trying to study what metrics first-time donors used, and major donors, and it turned out it was not about metrics. It was about emotion. It was a connection they had. And so what we have to do is we have to fan that connection. And I think you're familiar with my models of transactional giving and transformational giving. And one of the things in transformational giving is that when you're stewarding that donor, you not only convey the impact, the metric side of it, but you convey the benefits. Because remember that philanthropy is based in values. People do not give to, ask for, join, or serve any organization whose values they don't share. Only in the relationship do we constantly renew and test and promote those values. And in fact, gratitude itself is a value. And if I am not walking my talk, then I can say, oh, I'm so grateful. And if I don't show you gratitude during the year, I am a big proponent of gratitude committees on boards, people who write thank you notes. We have a new committee member at this organization that I was with last night. She is a master of thank you notes, and the one we love the most, a guy made a gift of $5,000. She wrote a handwritten thank you note, and he wrote back with a gift for $2,500 in it. Wow, he said, I haven't seen a handwritten thank you note in so long. And so, and that's, I think that we need to make people feel important, and because the work we do is important. And
that's right. And Kay, just I'll share. I know you know this, but that's one of the reasons, and it boggles a lot of people's minds, that I run an international donor advised fund that has given away over the last few years over $1 billion to 110 countries, and I personally sign every single thank you letter.
And that is so important.
That takes a lot of time to do that, but I always have said, if it's worth it for the donor to take the time to transact the donation to us, it's worth it the time for me to sign the thank you letter.
Totally. And the fact and to make sure it's right. I have seen, CEOs who get the stack of letters and they just keep flipping up the bottom to hand sign it. They never look at the top.
Oh yeah.
They
I'm
never
the final line in quality control.
That's right. Is this somebody I know? And
can I put a personal note on it? That's right.
Sure. Yep, exactly.
So Kay, I just want to note to our listeners that over at facebook.com/Ted Hart, we have now posted the Gilbert Chesterton quote that you opened the show with. I would maintain that thanks are the highest form of thought, and that gratitude is happiness doubled by wonder. We've also posted the Estonian proverb, who does not thank for little will not thank for much. We've also just posted your transformational infinity loop, the new approach to ask.
Excellent.
Just so that everybody has that and they have context to
and you can
what
put,
you're
if you have the transactional like bell curve, it's a good contrast to it because it reminds us
I'll do that
the curve is very, very finite, and the transformational is the infinity loop. Because
that's right.
That's the only
and so we're posting right now the transactional bell curve, the way we have.
Excellent.
Asked.
Thank you so much. And I think, Ted, when it comes right down to it, what you and I know after all of our decades in this is that philanthropy is truly a care cycle, that people give to us because they care. We provide services to people because we care, and we extend stewardship to our donors because they care that we care. And
right.
that's
if we're getting it right, which is the topic
right.
of today's show, is as you point out, stewardship is one of the oldest concepts in philanthropy, but oddly also one of the most neglected.
Exactly, and as long ago as Epicurus, in the Roman times, and getting back to what you and I talked about at the beginning about the issue where we put so much focus on acquisition, he has this wonderful quote: "Do not spoil what you have by desiring what you have not. Remember that what you now have was once among the things you only hoped for."
Right.
Yes. So just by way of finishing, there's 7 ideas for how to make other people feel important through your messaging with stewardship. And the other thing I do want to say is that we assign budget to cultivation because it has a measurable result. We hesitate to assign budget to stewardship because the results are often long-term. And we have to correct that in our finance offices. We have to have budget for stewardship. So the ways to make others feel important, and it applies to our stewardship: 1, use their name. 2, express sincere gratitude. 3, do more listening than talking. 4, talk more about them than about you. 5, be authentically interested. 6, be sincere in your praise. And 7, show you care. And I would like to close with the quotation that is at the bottom of my emails. Our goal should be to live life in radical amazement. Get up in the morning and look at the world in a way that takes nothing for granted. Everything is phenomenal. Everything is incredible. Never treat life casually. To be spiritual is to be amazed. And that's from Rabbi Heschel. And I believe, Ted, that when you engage donors consistently and sincerely, you will be amazed. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we're posting the quote from Epicurus today at facebook.com/Ted Hart, and we're just now posting for our listeners the wonderful quote that you just shared by Rabbi Abraham Josiah Heschel.
Yes.
So we've now reached that point in the show. As you know, we have about 5 minutes left where we get Kay Sprinkel Grace's best tips for success in the new year. And Kay, we've been doing this long enough. It's now going to be 2021. So how do our listeners succeed in 2021?
I think that going forward, philanthropy has got to be much more collaborative with other kinds of organizations in the community. The issues that we are dealing with, both chronic and critical, have reached a point where we need true community involvement. And we can lead the way. We have the trust, we have the knowledge, we have the experience, we have the people who are invested in us. And we need to become better thought leaders in terms of solutions. And, I totally believe that the reason that philanthropy never kind of makes that next big stride is that we have focused entirely too much on our organizations and not on solutions. And this is not about us. And in fact, in the best of all possible worlds, guess what? A lot of our organizations wouldn't have to exist if we could solve problems. The thing that is characteristic of the American public, and of course you and I both work internationally, but I'm speaking now just to the U.S. public, is that we are great in a crisis. Give us a crisis and we're on it. We are texting money, we are volunteering, we're doing these things. But when that crisis becomes chronic, we move on to the next crisis. So the chronic issues of our society will continue to confront us. They have the potential for eroding trust in nonprofits for two reasons. One is that we do not tell our own story. We are storytellers, but we don't tell our own story well. And, with all the issues we had on the southern border of the U.S., nobody was telling the story of those nonprofits down there that, frankly, were making all the difference in keeping families together and working very, very hard to lift this terrible smudge on our values as a society. These were nonprofits working together to see to it that they had an opportunity to alleviate this. So on the one hand, we don't tell our story, but the other hand is that we have become kind of siloed, and we're like the philanthropic sector, but we should be the philanthropic movement. And you've heard me say it before, and we did a forum here in San Francisco. The Rosso Forum this year was called Can Your .org Thrive in a Hashtag World? What our newer donors coming in are looking for, they're looking for results. And the results will happen when we do as my colleagues in Serbia do, and of course Serbia is a very small country, but when they have a countrywide problem, they are pulled together by a foundation there around the table. And it's the Orthodox Church, and it's the Chambers of Commerce, and it's the corporations, the foundations, and they say, okay, we've got this issue. How are we going to work together to solve it? If we began working together, we would be able to solve a lot more of the problems than if we continue to break this pie into so many pieces. We are not about competition. We are about collaboration. We have,
as we've said several times, Kay, on this show, one of the best things that I think nonprofits can do, and I think you're speaking to this, is to ask the question why. And when I say why do you exist? Why does your organization continue to raise money and to continue to do what it does? Are you still relevant? Do you still have a mission? Or do you exist out of habit?
That's right. And, I that acronym TRUE that I work with now is so enlightening to people when I work with them, because I said that this is what donors are looking for. And it's the word TRUE, and it's trust, relevance, urgency, and experience. And urgency is not your urgent need for money. It is the urgent need that you are meeting in the community. But it is trust and relevance, and absolutely, we need to remember that and this, why do you exist? I'm using that now to try to get people to write their mission statements. I'm saying, put aside all the infinitive forms of the verb, to educate, to inspire, to heal, to whatever. And I'm saying, just finish the idea, we exist because. And it is hard for people, but I will tell you, Ted, you see the light coming on in their eyes.
It is powerful. It
also says that there may be 22 organizations in your community with the same mission.
That's right. And why do they all exist?
Right.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it there.
I know, we have to go once again.
With so many wonderful things to think about for the new year. But I think again, this is powerful. The message of stewardship, the message of why you exist, and we cannot wait for you to be back on our show again next year. And that's our podcast for today.
Thanks, Ted. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Nonprofit Coach Podcast with Ted Hart. Tell all your friends to check out our production schedule and download our iPod and iPad-friendly podcasts at tedhart.com. Thanks for listening to the Nonprofit Coach.
When it comes to cleaning your house, who doesn't wish un galán with a trust fund swept in and passed the mop to your evil stepmom like in the telenovelas? Hola, it's Chiquis here, and although life isn't always like in the soap operas, Fabuloso does bring a clean that's always over the top. Get your home dramatically clean anytime you like, without any evil mama drama. Just long-lasting lavender freshness. That's Fabuloso, taking the drama out of any mess.
Fabuloso's 2 times concentrated formula provides 2 times more active ingredients versus non-concentrated Fabuloso Original. Use as directed.